Hello fellow human, hope you guys have a great day and let's read some r/pro-revenge stories. To the first one. Half-brothers threatened to sue me over 16k, it cost them 158k and possibly their parents' marriage. When I, 25 years old female, was 3, my grandparents passed away. They set up a savings account in my name. The account was meant to be accessed by me when I was 21. At this point, it contained just over 300k. My grandparents left me a letter saying that they would like me to share the money fairly with any other Smith or Jones children, meaning my full siblings, dad is a Smith, mom is a Jones. By fairly, they meant they wanted me to assess the situation and judge for myself what was fair. I never had full siblings, but I do have 2 half-brothers, Mac and Joe Smith, who are my dad and my stepmom's kids. Due to the specific wording my grandparents used, I legally never had to give Mac or Joe any money. However, I see Mac and Joe as my brothers, and as the money came from our grandparents, I felt that the fairest thing would be to assign each of us 100k. So we all got an equal-sized lump sum, and I figured that when Mac, the youngest, turned 21 and took his 100k, we could split any remaining money. When I turned 21, Dad suggested I buy a house with my 100k. I found a place and loved it, but it was 130k. And I couldn't get a mortgage, so Dad said I should borrow the 30k from the account. And I did, figuring that I could pay it back before my brothers turned 21. And I've been repaying it. The account should be at 208k right now, but due to me withdrawing and then repaying that money, it's at 195k, so I still owe 13k. Joe turned 21 recently, and as I was giving him his 100k, Joe noticed that there was less in the account than there should be. I explained and said I was going to put it all back before Mac, now 19, turns 21. Joe told Mac, and both boys said I stole from them and owed them the full 13k back plus 3 grand of interest that they felt they could have been gotten. And they wanted it all paid by the summer, which gave me less than 6 months to bring the account up to 211k. I said I'd do it, but over 2 years as planned. The boys then wrote up a contract to that effect. I went to sign it until I saw that it said 6 months to pay it all back. I wouldn't sign as we agreed on 2 years. They said I should figure it out as they were entitled to that money and would be seeking legal advice. Later that day, I got an email clearly written by them saying that they intend to sue me for the 16k plus whatever is currently in the account and the additional damages and emotional distress on top of that. At this point in time, I'd given Joe about 50k of his 100k because he wanted it in installments. I responded that legally, they were never entitled to any of it, and given their attitudes, I'd say they've already received an amount I deem fair, so that 50k was all they were getting. I then got a barrage of texts, calls, and emails yelling at me for going back on our deal. I blocked them. They then took to the social media saying that I was trying to screw them out of their inheritance and rallying our extended family into harassing me over this, and it mostly worked as a lot of people messaged me. However, I got a message from this guy called Chris Smith. Chris said he was 27 and claimed to be my half-brother. I had never met him before, but he sent me photos of him as a kid with our dad, grandparents, and me. He showed me that he also had an account with 150k in it and a scanned letter from our grandparents saying that this money was meant to be shared fairly among dad's illegitimate children. Chris also told me we have another half-sibling who is 18. He'd been looking for me for a while, but only found me when Dad shared Joe's post, which had me tagged. We checked with a solicitor to make sure, and as the boys are legitimate, they aren't entitled to anything in Chris' illegitimate kid fund. And as they are my half-siblings, they aren't entitled to anything in my Smith-Jones kids fund either. I sent the boys a letter formally telling them to back off, stop posting about me online, and enjoy the 50k because it's all they are getting. The day they received the letter, Chris got a PM from Dad asking if the boys can have some of Chris' fund. Chris also said no and told Dad we'd met. I told Mac and Joe about Chris and our other half-sibling with Chris' permission. So it looks like my grandparents, knowing about Chris before they passed, set up 2 funds. One for the kids Dad had with my mother, who was still his wife when they passed, and one for children born out of Dad's affair, presumably to make sure no one tried to screw anyone else over out of hurt feelings. I'm getting a lot of crap, but holding firm on my decision. The boys have realized that I won't back down on this, and it sounds like I've caused a schism at their house. As Joe has all the money and no intention of sharing, so Mac is now feeling twice as screwed. Plus, stepmom apparently did not know about the other half-siblings. Or that my half-sister was born after she and dad got married and she's made dad move into a hotel. It sounds like dad is looking for a long-term living arrangement outside of the family home, because it looks like she's not letting him move back in. Dad is begging me to reconsider. But honestly, I'm done with all of them except Chris and my sister. Well, I gotta say that your grandparents were pretty forward-thinking. And I think they just knew your dad well enough to know that he'd screw around. The second story. Friend Crank called me at my job, so I had him serve with a fake paternity suit at his. 10 years ago, a friend of mine, Crank, called me several times in my office over the course of a day. I decided in that moment that 1. This would not stand, and 2. Rather than entering into a long, protracted quagmire of a prank war, I would use the nuclear option and end it immediately. My friend, Mike, was a well-known local bartender. I worked at the same bar as a bouncer, and he was very much enjoying single life at the time, facts which I knew I could take advantage of. Soon, a plan began to form. I would have him served with a fake paternity suit while he was working at the bar. So I compiled a ton of free online legal documents, not just for the paternity suit, but also income disclosure forms, statements of parental rights, and suggested visitation schedules pending demonstrable proof of sobriety. I filled out all the forms, then smeared what looked like date received stamps as proof they had been filed, and ran copies to make those stamps even more illegible. From there, I crafted a backstory to be included in a cover letter from the fictional mother's fake law firm, the nearby city law firm center, on letterhead and all. The mother was an Irish exchange student visiting the area the previous summer. She had only been with Mike, so she knew the baby Eliza was his. The cover letter encouraged Mike to call during regular office hours to discuss arranging a DNA test to affirm paternity. I set up a generic voicemail for the number listed as the office on the letterhead. By the end, the paperwork was somewhere between 20 to 25 pages. I enlisted another friend not known by Mike to serve the documents and instructed him to do so around 10 p.m. on a Saturday evening. I told him to keep the interaction very simple. I wasn't able to be by the back bar because I knew I would be laughing too hard, but based on eyewitnesses and reports it played out like this. Friend, are you Mike? Last name? Mike, yes. Friend, Michael, middle name, last name? Mike, oh yes. Friend, drops folder on bar. Mike, what's that? Friend, well, paternity suit. You have been served, turns around and immediately walks out of the bar. Mike, well, yeah, that sounds about right. Mike read through the packet, shakily poured himself several drinks, and then ran over to the bar owner, who was aware of the prank, to ask what to do. He also called the number on the letterhead but sadly did not leave a voicemail. After a solid 10 minutes of intense psychological revenge, the owner finally told Mike he should closely read the last page of the packet. On it, in size 2 font, it reads, "Go screw yourself, Mike!" At which point, Mike ran out to the front door and punched me in the chest. Epilogue. Several months later, Mike was on a trip across the country. He had left his car at home with his mom, who generously had it washed for him. Mike, for some reason, kept the paternity suit paperwork in his driver's side door. During the course of the car wash, his mother found it and read the entire thing, then called him sobbing in the middle of the night, asking why he hadn't told her about her bastard Irish granddaughter. Oh, that epilogue though. Of course you'd think that he was frantically trying to explain to his mother, or he was just laughing his butt off on how incredible this revenge was. On to the third story. He ruined my sister's only birth experience, so I made sure he'd never forget her. Kinda my revenge, kinda my sister's, both of us really proud. Here's our cast. My sister, we'll call her Sarah for the story. Sister's ex-boyfriend, Paul, ex-boyfriend's new wife, Jane, ex-boyfriend's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, oldest brother, Zeke, our parents, and me. When I was 14, my oldest sister, Sarah, was 22, and we found out that she was pregnant with Paul, her boyfriend of 4 years. They immediately got engaged, and they were really happy. For a time, Sarah had a horrible pregnancy. About 16 to 18 weeks in the wonder of creating a human life evaporated within her. She developed hyperemesis, which if you don't know, is really bad morning sickness. She was constantly in pain. She developed gestational diabetes and just all around hated the experience. Around this time, Paul, then the fiancé, started getting sick of the complaining. I believe the argument was, your body is built to do this, it can't be that bad. Sarah was due around Valentine's Day, and Paul's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Doe, were very excited, both about the grandkid and the fact that he could be born on a holiday. She was very against that and really hoped that her son wouldn't be born on a holiday, even one as small as Valentine's Day. Her birthday sometimes falls on Easter and she hates it because it might make him feel that his day isn't very much about him. Well, Mrs. Doe says something like, "Well, if you name him like Valentine or Valentino, then that will make the day even more special to him." Again, sister hated the idea. She thought it was tacky, he'd be make fun out of it, and really just didn't like the name Valentino. Paul loved it, but agreed to go with a more average name like Daniel or Jared. Fast forward to February, and she was ready to get this over with. Sarah had officially been put on bed rest because while standing or walking, her blood pressure took unexpected spikes and dips. I look back now and goodness do I feel bad for her. She was doing her best to avoid giving birth on Valentine's Day because, again, she didn't want him to born on a holiday. Unfortunately, birth happened when they happened and that the baby was going to come on Valentine's Day whether she wanted him to or not. I remember waiting out in the waiting room with my dad, brothers, and Paul, who couldn't stand to be in the delivery room because it was gross. I was so mad that he could have gone in but wouldn't because he thought my sister was gross while giving birth, whereas I had to stay outside because I was too young to go in with my mom and other sister. Dad went home with the youngest two brothers while the oldest, Zeke, stayed to watch me because I refused to leave. 16 hours after Sarah went into labor, my little nephew was officially part of the family on the evening of Valentine's Day. Unfortunately, Sarah was not okay. She had to have an emergency cesarean section and while doing the operation discovered that the back of her uterus facing her spinal cord had a very large and very severe, thankfully non-cancerous tumor. Well, I say large, I mean it was twice the size of a standard uterus. The doctors were shocked and didn't understand why nobody had noticed it on an ultrasound. It accounted for her severe back pain and blood pressure issues. The doctors immediately went in for more surgery to remove the tumor, but sadly ended up having to perform a full hysterectomy. This meant that my nephew would be Sarah's only child. Now, while Sarah was in for surgery, Paul was taking care of everything baby related to make sure his son was okay. In my 14 years old self-memory, I remember him being suitably distraught, but I didn't really pay him much mind and spent my time in the waiting room with my mother and other sister. Zeke, however, wanted to be a good future brother-in-law and make sure that Paul was okay. He found Paul filling out the baby paperwork on his own looking, in my brother's word, like he had not a single worry in his mind. Zeke asked why Paul didn't wait for Sarah to fill out the paperwork as she should have been put off surgery within the hour, and Paul said that he just wanted her to get her rest and heal. That checked out with Zeke as he was 16 and didn't know any better at the time. Now, I know what you're probably thinking. No, he wouldn't. He knows how much she hates that name. And still, she'd need to sign the paperwork too. My fellow peoples of Reddit, I regret to inform you that Paul forged Sarah's signature on the paperwork and waited until she was out of surgery to hand said paperwork over. My sweet nephew, that was born on Valentine's Day, was named Valentino on his first official birth certificate. I still to this day don't know why Paul and his family were so insistent about the name. He had even picked out a different one with my sister. And before you ask, no, he was never brought up on forgery charges because his parents were witnesses to her signing the papers, even though they only got there at the last minute. So Sarah dumped him and got her son's name changed a month later. She was willing to split custody with him because that's her son's father and she wants the kid to know him. But Paul vanished and she never heard anything back, which seemed weirdly out of character to us. Until a mutual friend on Facebook was tagged in his wedding pictures 6 months later. Paul had apparently started cheating on her not long after she got pregnant. Sarah was livid, but there wasn't much she could do, so she filed for child support and continued to live her best life. Until 6 years later. This is where the revenge starts, my friends. So Sarah has been a single mother for the past 6 years and has been amazing at it. At this point in my career, I've been a hairdresser for about 8 months at our local Great Clips. I'm working one day, and who is seated before me but Jane, Paul's wife, herself. I take her back for a trim and she clearly has no idea who I am. That adds up because the mutual friend that still keeps in contact with Paul said that Jane doesn't know a thing. She has no idea about Sarah, and that she was the other woman, or that Paul actually has a kid that he's been infrequently paying child support for. She's in the dark on it all. I told myself not to be a butt and treat her like a normal customer, which I did. Now, at this point, Jane was heavily pregnant, so a lot of our conversation was about that. She loved being pregnant, but it was hard. Her husband was so unsympathetic, big shocker, and she was due in 10 weeks and they still hadn't picked out a name for their baby girl. Ladies and gentle peoples, this was my chance. I asked what kind of name she was looking for and she said, I want something unique and unusual, but not ridiculous like Bray Lay Lay. You know the ones I'm talking about, and Paul had suggested so many already and she didn't like any of them. So I, conniving little weasel I am, said, what about Sarah? My sister's name isn't actually Sarah. She was named after an older family member that passed not long after she was born, but there was no female equivalent for his name, so our parents created one. It's a beautiful name and just what Jane was looking for. She loved it, she stuck by it, and I found out by stalking her Facebook months later that she had put her foot down about it, and that was their daughter's name. Now, Paul has a daughter with his ex-name to remind him every day about her, and also to remind him to pay his ducking child support. Little nephew is 10 years old now with a new name and no contact with his biological father, so we do still sometimes call him Val as a family nickname. He likes it but doesn't want to bring it to school, so it's staying a family's nickname. Sarah pretends to hate when we call him that in a joking way. As long as he likes it, she doesn't have a problem with it. And she's seeing a new guy who's really great and like a father to Val. Oh, this is so fabulous, and he can't really say anything without revealing what kind of a jerk he is. That's it for today, fellow humans. Thanks for watching. Be sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next time.